Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my session. As we're all joining over the next few minutes or so, could you just pop into the chat any information about you, where you are, what type of school you're working in, and the languages that you teach in your school. It's lovely to see so many people coming in. Welcome. Just pop your name and some information about where you are in the country, your languages that you speak in your school and or the languages you teach in your school, and any other information that you might want to into the chat. The chat box is at the bottom of your screen. I think it is on mine anyway. And hopefully we should see, lovely. We've got Nikki from Somerset teaching French, Spanish and Latin. Brilliant. Oh, that's amazing. I used to do a little bit of Latin in my school. Brilliant. Anna, hi, Anna is from Hampshire and teaching French to Key Stage 1 and 2. Oh, really lovely to hear that people are teaching languages in Key Stage 1 as well. That's brilliant. Fabulous. Welcome. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Friday afternoon as well. So no doubt lots of us are starting to feel a little bit tired. Hello, British School of Paris. Bonjour. Hello, Annalise, who is teaching French from EYFS to Year 6. Fabulous. Charlie in Chepstow, hello, secondary and primary languages. ITE, brilliant. Lovely to see you. Really nice to see people in ITE represented. Lara, hello, teaching Spanish in Key Stage 1 and 2. Another Key Stage 1, fantastic. And Marie, who is north of Glasgow, teaching primary French, so Scotland. Lovely, thank you. Deb, hello from London. Another one teaching French across all the key stages, 1, 2 and 3. Hi, Kate. Is moving to Slovenia in January. Fabulous. Oh, it's a beautiful country. But has been teaching French in Key Stage 1 and German Key Stage 2. Naima from Leeds teaching Urdu. Brilliant. We can see our community languages represented. Hi and welcome. Natalie is teaching French and Spanish in EYFS up to Year 11. My goodness, that is a wide range. Fabulous. And Jenny from Scotland as well, doing primary Spanish and also French and German in secondary. Welcome. And Marta from London teaching Spanish in primary. That's amazing. I think we have got people represented from many, many different parts of the UK. So welcome and thank you for being here today. It's so lovely to see everybody, or not to see everybody, which is a slightly unnerving thing about all of this, but to hear that you're all out there and to see that you're all out there in the participants box. So today we are going to be talking about developing listening skills in the primary languages classroom. A lot of the examples that I'm going to share with you today are French, because the language that I teach most in my school is French. But of course, these activities are applicable to all languages, I would argue. So my name is Ellie. I am the Languages and International Lead, amongst other things, at Hazel Community Primary School in Leicester. And I am a primary qualified teacher, but I also have a degree in French and Hispanic studies. So I sort of got landed, if you like, quite unexpectedly with the role of teaching French in my school. And I absolutely love it. It's a role that I've had for the past 6 years now. And it's something that I feel really, really, really passionate about. I tweet every now and again at ECC MFL. I don't think we can say tweet anymore, can we? Because it's not called Twitter, but let's say that. And I also have a blog at myprimarylanguagesclassroom.com where I just share thoughts and inspiration and resources as well, mostly for the teaching of French, but also for Spanish in the primary school. So today, as I've said, we're going to be thinking about listening. Please don't forget to put any questions that you might have as we go through in the Q&A section. So there is a chat section, which we've just used, but there's also a separate Q&A section for any questions that you have. And we will have time for questions at the end of the session. So I shall look forward to talking to you a little bit more then. Okay, so the aims of this afternoon really are to consider the importance and the challenges of teaching listening to primary children, because there are lots of challenges, but we know that listening is really, really important, a very important skill. And we're going to have a look at some different listening activities that you can take back to your own classroom. Some of them you may already know already. I know lots of you are doing amazing things out there already. And hopefully you'll come away with a couple of different new ideas that you've not thought of before. And I'm also going to flag up some free listening resources which are suitable for our primary learners, because one of the big challenges that we have as primary practitioners is actually finding authentic listening resources that our children can access. So to start off with, we're going to have a quick think about the importance and the challenges of teaching listening skills. Now, listening is clearly a really essential element of language learning. Because listening tasks provide children with a rich source of language, which they can use then to build their own idea about how language works. And this is from Phillips' work from 1993. And I think we'd all agree that without the ability to listen to spoken language, pupils will find it really, really difficult to engage in any kind of real life interaction with native speakers. I think sometimes it's quite tempting to think of listening as a very passive process. So children listen to what we are saying, but actually it involves a lot of activity, and it should be an active activity. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today shows that listening is very far from a passive thing. It is an action. It's something that we have to do and be actively engaged with. But as with everything, there are always challenges, both for teachers and for learners. And I think, excuse me, as primary practitioners, we face slightly different challenges to perhaps our secondary colleagues, excuse me, because we often are leading people within our teams and within our schools who may not be familiar with the language that they are teaching, and who may find some of the sounds and the pronunciation, etc., very, very challenging, and find the idea of speaking so that children can listen very difficult. We also know that learners find listening one of the more difficult skills by a study from Graham in 2006. We know that MFL study, excuse me, I haven't been coughing all day and all of a sudden it's happened. Learners find listening one of the more difficult skills in which to make progress. And one of the biggest challenges that we have at primary, as I've already mentioned, is a lack of authentic listening materials at primary level. We don't have the kind of resources that our secondary colleagues do to teach the language or to teach the listening skill in the language. And of course, the other challenge for us is that we are generally quite pushed for time. We have always about less than an hour a week to actually teach the children, or most of us have less than an hour a week to teach the children, and the children aren't immersed in that language all the time. So of course, listening is going to be a little bit of a challenge for them. So what does the programme of study tell us that we need to be doing in listening at Key Stage 2? Now, I know that we have some Key Stage 1 colleagues here with us, and there isn't actually any guidance for our Key Stage 1 colleagues because there isn't a statutory obligation to be teaching languages. But this is from the Key Stage 2 programme of study. And one of the main targets is, of course, to listen attentively to spoken language and show understanding by joining in and responding. And that's going to look very different in year 3 to in year 6. And so we need to think about what might that look like in year 3, year 4, year 5, and year 6, if we're going to be thinking about progression. But we also have other targets which are linked to this listening idea. We've got appreciation of stories and songs and poems and rhymes in the language. So in order to be able to do that, children are going to need to listen. And we're going to be thinking as well about teaching children to explore the patterns and sounds of language through songs and rhymes, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later on. And then, of course, link that to the spelling, sound, and meaning of words, which moves us on from listening towards our writing and our reading, of course. And as with all of these skills that we talk about, listening is also deeply interconnected with all of the other skills of speaking and reading and writing. We're going to be asking children to engage in conversations. So engaging in conversation is, of course, speaking. But if children are to answer questions, which is part of this target, they're going to need to be able to listen in order to be able to answer them and express their opinions. And they're going to need to respond to the questions of others and seek clarification and help, all of which involve an element of listening and comprehension of what they've heard as well. So what can we do then to help our children to build the listening skills that they need to be really successful language learners at Key Stage 2? Well, I think one of the main ways, and this can be, as I've mentioned previously, quite challenging for some of our teachers if we happen to be a language lead in a primary school, is we really want to be immersing our children in the target language as much as we possibly can. And that means using the target language within the classroom where possible and as often as possible. And the reason for that is that it attunes pupils' ears, of course, to the sounds and the rhythms and the intonation of language. And it doesn't have to be for the whole lesson. We're not going to necessarily be teaching an entire lesson in French or Spanish or German, but we can really incorporate things like greetings and simple instructions and basic classroom vocabulary into our lessons so that pupils are hearing it over and over again. They're hearing the same sorts of things. Stand up, sit down, put your hands up, show me your whiteboard, all of these kinds of things. Well done. So we're always thinking about using that language so that the children are naturally picking it up. Because when we listen as children to a language that we're learning as babies and toddlers, the way that we acquire that language is by listening to the adults who are around us and using it. And of course, all of this is going to be accompanied with lots of hand gestures and maybe flashcards or images and things that really help children to understand what that language means. Now, for those of us who are leading other teachers who are non-specialist at primary, this can be quite challenging. And this is something that you might want to think about building into your whole school CPD or your whole school staff meetings to actually teach teachers who are doing lessons as non-specialists, how to use this kind of vocabulary and the kind of vocabulary that you want to hear them using within the classroom so that children can be immersed in the target language as much as possible. Of course, we're not all native speakers, but nonetheless, it's really good for children to be hearing that language all of the time. And when we're talking about listening, we're also thinking a lot about the importance of phonics. Now, the phonics scheme that I use within my scheme of work is physical French phonics, which I'm sure lots of you will know about already, written by Sue Cave and Jean Haig. There's also a Spanish version as well, and published by Brilliant Publications. And I love this scheme of work really because it's so simple and straightforward, and because if you are a lead and you're leading non-specialists who may be really, really unsure about phonics, then these are really helpful because they've got all the embedded videos and pronunciation that can be used to support teachers who are non-specialist. So phonics is, of course, one of the 3 pillars of language learning as outlined by Ofsted, along with vocabulary and grammar. And we know that a good grounding in phonics provides children with the key to crack the code of letters and sounds in the target language. And the method that I've outlined just here, the physical French phonics or the physical Spanish phonics, actually teaches children to, or ear trains the children, shall we say, before it even introduces any idea of graphemes, which I think is really, really great because it allows the children to attune themselves to these new sounds before actually looking at the spelling, which can be very, very complicated, because automatically, if children look at a spelling in French, they're going to apply their phonic knowledge from English before they think to apply their phonic knowledge for French, at least in the initial stages. So in this scheme, children don't actually see the written representation of the grapheme initially, but they actually build up their ability to pronounce words and hear words really, really accurately through the use of image cards. And these image cards actually represent phonemes. So the phoneme is the sound that the children hear. So however you're doing phonics, and this is just one way that I flagged up because it's the way that I do it, however you're doing phonics, we need to make sure that that is really, really well embedded as part of our listening activities so that children are able to access the sounds of the language, and later build on that to help them with their spelling as well, and their reading, of course. A really nice game that I like to play to practice phonic sounds in particular is to choose a particular sound that I want the children to focus on. It doesn't matter what that sound is. It might be one that I want them to revise because we've not done it for a while, or it might be one that is a new one and they're not really 100% confident with it yet. And then I will read out a list of maybe 7 or 8 words, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the year group that you have. And some of those words contain the focus sound, and some of them don't contain the focus sound. Every time the children hear a word that contains the focus sound, they put a block into their tower. And it's a really nice activity because you can use Duplo blocks, you can use those little multi-link cubes or stacking cubes from maths. And all the children need to do is to build their tower. And at the end, you can find out how accurate they've been with their listening by looking at their tower and asking them to count how many blocks are there. It's a really nice way to get children tuned into particular phonic sounds. And if you are using this particular phonic scheme, there's loads and loads and loads of games inside there that are really helpful for helping children to build up their listening skills and their knowledge of phonemes before they move then on to graphemes and building words and phrases. Now, I think something that's really, really great for practicing listening is music. In fact, I think music is great for everything, but listening skills can be really developed through music, and I really enjoy using music in my classroom. Now, there's lots of different ways that we can use songs, and one of the ways that I really like is to make a very, very active process out of the listening. One of the things that I do quite often is to give children keywords or phrases that I want them to look out for in a song, and then they have to stand up when they hear that particular phrase. And in order to make sure that the children don't all just copy each other, I kind of divide it up so that different children have different words or different phrases that they're looking for. This works really well with things like months of the year songs, for example, where children might stand up when they hear the month of their birthday, or particular number songs where you allocate children different numbers and then they stand up at different times. I also find that you can do really, really nice ordering activities if you want children to listen out for a particular word, for example, and then order flashcards according to when those words appear in the song. I'm sure lots of you are familiar with the song Léon le Caméléon, which you should be able to see on the screen just now. Léon le Caméléon is a really lovely song that introduces lots and lots of different colours through the character of Léon, who is a chameleon. And I really like to use colour flashcards because then it means that the children can listen to the colour and then they put the colours into the correct order or into the order that they hear them in the song. And they really enjoy doing that, and then comparing the colours that they've put with another group or another pair. Another thing that I like to do with songs as well to practice children's listening is to play a song at the start of a topic. So, for example, I might play the months of the year song at the start of a topic, or I might play a greetings song at the start of a topic. And I would then ask the children, what do they think our topic is going to be about? It may be that they've heard that song before and they're re-listening to it, or it may be that they've never heard that song before, but it's got lots of cognates in it that the children might be able to pick up on. So there's no visual clues, but the children then are listening out for words that they think are familiar and trying to work out what the song is about. And finally, another really nice activity to do with songs, a little bit further up the school where children have got a bit more of a grasp of reading in particular, is to give the children the lyrics of a very, very simple song and leave some areas of that song lyric sheet blank. So when the children listen to the song, or they might see it on the screen as well, when they listen to that song, they're actually listening out for which words they think fill in the blanks. So these are usually words that they have done before, that they've visited before, or learned about before, and the children then write them in to the gaps. What's really nice about YouTube as well is that if you find a song that you think suits, but actually it's a little bit fast, you can go into the settings section and you can change the playback speed. So if I want to play Léon le Caméléon at its normal speed, I can. But if I want to change it,
Léon le caméléon change de couleur, quel polisson. Léon le...
So I can change the speed at which the music is played. Now, obviously, we're not going to want it to be too slow, but for some children, it can be really helpful to slow down the music so that they can hear a little bit more easily and they can fill in as they go. Okay, now one of the ways that I discovered over lockdown to help my children develop their listening was to use two really fantastic online resources, which are WordWall and Learning Apps. And I'm sure lots of you know about these already and have used them. And what I really like about these both, Learning Apps in particular, but also WordWall now, because they've incorporated this into their program as well, is that you can put audio into any activities that you do. And this is really nice because what I tend to find is whenever I'm doing listening activities with my classes, it tends to be me that's doing the speaking when the children are listening. And that's fine to an extent, but also it means that the children kind of don't get an opportunity to hear a native speaker speaking when they're doing their listening activities. Now, all the things that I'm going to show you now are ones that I've created using Learning Apps, but similar things can be created using WordWall. So, for example, I created this really nice, simple number line activity. It took me about 3 minutes. It's Spanish, and the children just need to click onto one of the audios.
Dos.
And they hear the number, and then all they need to do is to drag it and match it up to the correct number that they've heard, and that one's done. And they can go through and do all of them, and match them up to the correct place on the number line. That can be done as a whole class, as a starter activity, and children writing things on whiteboards, or it could be done through something like Google Classroom, where you paste the link into Google Classroom, and all of the children then are able to access it and have a go at it independently. Similar sort of thing, but a little bit more complicated. This time, the children are listening to a particular audio that describes their city or something that there is in their city.
En mi ciudad, hay una plaza y un parque y también hay una oficina de correos.
Okay, so a lot more challenging because actually it's much, much faster than I would speak to the children if I was speaking to them in the target language. And then they're probably going to have to listen to it again.
En mi ciudad, hay una plaza y un parque y también hay una oficina de correos.
Okay, and now they've got to try and match that up with what they think the English translation is. Again, didn't take very long to do, but it's a really effective way of helping the children to listen when a native speaker is speaking. And finally, following on a little bit from the missing blanks activity, Learning Apps also allows you to create a blanks activity yourself. I've actually put a how-to for this activity onto my blog. So if you are interested in making one of these, then if you go onto my blog, it's there. Here, I've recorded myself speaking. Now, it's me, which is a bit annoying because the accent isn't going to be that of a native speaker. If you know a native speaker, or you have somebody in your school who's able to do this, or you are yourself a native speaker, even better, you can get them to do this part for you. So I'm going to read aloud the text, and there are some boxes here where the children are going to select a word that the word that matches into that box.
Aujourd'hui, dans le nord, il fait froid et il y a du vent. Par contre, dans le sud...
Okay, so the children can fill that in with the information that is missing, and they can pause and rewind the bits that they need to so that they can re-listen. What's nice about that is because it's me doing it, it's much slower, so the children have more of an opportunity to access. If you wanted to make it more challenging, you could obviously speed up the speed of the narration. So these two are really, really great ways of getting that native speaker aspect into your listening activities. And of course, we can always use games as well. Games are a really great way for us to develop children's listening skills. And I'm sure that you've heard of lots of these before, but I'm going to go through them anyway. A classic is, of course, Jacques a dit, Simon says. So we say an instruction, and at the start we say Jacques a dit. And if you want the children to copy it, you say Jacques a dit, and then whatever your instruction is. Or Jacques a dit, le foot, if you've shown them what different actions for different sports or whatever. And then the children have to do it. If you don't want them to copy you, you just don't say Jacques a dit at the start, and anyone who does the action is then out of the game. Really nice, really simple, no preparation required, and a really lovely listening activity for the children that they find really enjoyable. Another one that's very low prep or no prep in some cases is a game that I call Montrez-moi. I'm sure you have something similar. I'm not sure what you call it, but I'm sorry, I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat. Oh yes, I will share. Yes, Catherine, I'll share my website at the end again. Yes, thank you. Thanks for flagging that up. Montrez-moi is a game where the children have a range of flashcards, or it might be items in front of them. So, for example, items from a pencil case, or little flashcards showing items of clothing. And they have those between them and their partner. So they're sharing a pack of those flashcards or a group of those objects between them and their partner. And then I will shout out, Montrez-moi, show me. And the first person to hold up the flashcard with the thing that I've asked for on it gets a point. Now, it might be that that is very simply Montrez-moi un crayon, show me a pencil. Or it might be more complex than that. It might be Montrez-moi une grande maison, show me a big house. And then the children have to find the big house flashcard rather than the small house or whatever. So it's just a way that the children can tune in, listen, and it also adds in that competitive element, which I think makes them listen even harder, which is really, really, really important. And another one, which I have taken from the fantastic Games for Teaching Primary French. If you haven't got a copy of it, I definitely recommend getting it. It's a really wonderful book by Danielle Bourdet and Sue Finney, which breaks down the different skills, speaking, listening, reading, writing, and grammar as well. And gives lots and lots of games in French, but could be applied to lots of other languages to practice those different aspects of language learning. Loto en ligne, this one is called, as opposed to traditional Loto. Instead of just hearing the item of vocabulary or the chunk of vocabulary just once, the children actually hear it multiple times. They have a strip that might have maybe 6 or 7 little boxes like this on it. And I will say an item of vocabulary or a chunk of vocabulary. And if that piece of vocabulary is at the top or the bottom of their strip, they can cut it off. If it's not, then they have to wait. So if I said, for example, l'ananas, the pineapple, they would be able to cut that off. If I said la mangue, the mango, even though they've got it on their strip, they will have to wait, because it is in the middle at the moment and they're going to have to wait for others to be removed until they can cut it off. And what's really nice about this is the language comes round again and again and again and again. So it's not just being said once, as it is in traditional Loto. Super. So those are games that just practice pure listening, if you like, but we know that all of these skills are interconnected one with the other. So another thing that I really love to do is to do missing information grids like this. So the children work in pairs. This is going to practice children's reading and writing as well as their listening. One is A and one is B, and they sit with their backs to each other, or they sit with something behind their laminated sheets so that it can't be seen. The first child has, or both children have got lots of blank boxes on their grid. And the aim is for them to fill those boxes, but the main rule is that they're not allowed to look at each other's grids. They have to keep them hidden. So they would choose a number. So for example, 5, A has got 5 and it's missing. So they're going to say 5 to their partner, and their partner is going to look in box 5 and they will say Lille. This is a really simple version of this game. You can do it in a much more complex way with longer words, with agreements, etc. This is one that I use with year 3. So Lille, and person A is going to write Lille into box number 5. If I want to extend it, they might say où habites-tu? And then they just say 5. And then hopefully their friend recognizes that où habites-tu means where do you live? And then they say Lille, and Lille is written in here. Then they swap over. So person B now has got to try and fill in their blank boxes. They might say numéro 7, numéro 7. Où habites-tu? And their partner responds, j'habite à Bordeaux, Bordeaux. And Bordeaux gets written in here. So you can see you can extend it in lots of different ways. The children might just say the word, or they might put it into a full phrase. It depends completely on the child. But they keep swapping backwards and forwards until eventually they've filled in the whole grid. So they're listening really carefully to the information that their partner is giving them with the aim of filling their whole grid in correctly. Here is Lotto, the traditional way. Here it's going to involve some reading because the children have got to choose a range of different sentences and put them into their Lotto grid. This could be done using Google Classroom again, or you could do it the traditional way, which is to do it on a whiteboard or on a pre-prepared laminated sheet. As I read out the phrase, the children have to read the phrase, listen and read the phrase, and cross it off if they have it on their grid. So again, another really nice way of getting children to listen, but also combining in other skills as well. This is a game that I find children sometimes struggle with. It's Battleships, La Bataille Navale. Lots of children have never played this game in my school anyway, so I spend quite a lot of time explaining this, and because I've spent a lot of time explaining it, I then reuse the activity as many times as possible so that we get lots of mileage out of it. This is an example from year 3. The children are creating their own sentences. They decide which boxes their crosses are going to go into. So for example, I might put a cross in j'aime le pain au chocolat. And then I put 5 more crosses somewhere on my grid. And then my partner questions me, asking me information. So for example, they might say, je n'aime pas la barquette. So je n'aime pas is this way and la barquette this way. So this means it goes in this box here. If I've got a cross in that box, I can say oui, that means they've guessed it correctly. If I haven't got a cross, I say non. So it's a really nice game to play between partners where they're practicing their speaking, but they also have to listen really carefully in order to locate where the sentence is that their partner is saying to them. Another really nice game to practice that collaboration and cooperation, but also the children are trying to beat each other, which is a really, really motivating factor in getting them to listen carefully to what the other person is saying. As we get further up the school, I try to incorporate activities where the children are listening and deciding if what I'm saying is correct or it's not correct. So they're actually listening out, not just for the information, but they're listening out to see if there are any mistakes in the information that I'm giving them. So this is an example that I did a couple of weeks ago with year 6, because they needed quite a lot of recapping on the basic kind of introduction phrases and sentence starters. So I would read, for example, this first box and say to the children, c'est vrai ou c'est faux? It's true or it's false. And they have to decide if what I'm saying is correct. Je m'appelle Amal, j'habite à Paris, je suis algérienne, j'ai 10 ans. Now, in that case, I have read exactly what the children are seeing on their sheet. So I would tick, the child would tick vrai. In the case that I read it incorrectly, so for example, je m'appelle Mohamed, j'habite à Marseille, je suis indien, j'ai 11 ans. So there I've changed not for Marseille. This time it would be faux. So they'll put a little cross in faux. Now, for some children, that's going to be enough. They don't need to do any more than that. But for some children, they're going to want to challenge themselves a little bit more. And that's why I always leave a little corrections box just here where the children can mark anything that I have said incorrectly. So again, practicing not just listening, but also reading. And for some children who are pushing themselves further, a little bit of writing as well. So they might write here, j'habite à Marseille. I live in Marseille. And of course, we know that for our secondary colleagues, dictation is back on the radar, but how can we support them with that skill in the primary languages classroom? There are lots of different ways that we can do that. Very simply by getting children to practice particular words and phrases. So saying a phrase to children and getting them to write it down, seeing if they're managing to get their agreement correct, for example, seeing if they're including their accents correctly. And we can also play lots and lots of different games with that as well. We can have a think about getting children to spot mistakes in dictations that we have done, for example. So I think even though this one is a little bit tricky, because again, if we're non-specialist and we're not sure about our own pronunciation, etc., dictation can be a little bit challenging. But I also think that it's something that we do need to keep in mind, because we know that when the children go on to secondary, this is something that they are going to need to be thinking about, and it's a skill that they are going to be practicing or learning and practicing. So we need to keep that in mind. And I'm sure over time, there's going to be a lot more resources released for primary schools relating to dictation because of that trickle-down effect from secondary. Now, as I've already mentioned, it can be quite difficult to find authentic listening resources for Key Stage 2 because they just aren't out there. There just aren't the schemes of work out there that include lots and lots of different listening activities. If you have access to a paid-for scheme of work, then you might find that they're already embedded. But if we're making our own scheme of work or coming up with our own ideas, we may find that, that listening activities are few and far between. So to try and plug that gap, a really good place to have a look for authentic listening resources read by read by native speakers is at the Languages in Primary Schools Listening Project. So it's been created by the members of the Languages in Primary Schools Facebook group, which if you're not a member, I definitely recommend that you join. It's absolutely full of really supportive colleagues who have tons of ideas. And if you're ever stuck for anything and you just want to do a quick search of the group to find out what other people have done, then you will come up with hundreds and hundreds of responses usually. So here, native speakers have actually read out particular pieces of text or created particular listening activities, and they are available on Claire Seckham's Lightbulb Languages website, on the website that I've just listed there. Let's have a quick look. It looks like this, and you'll see that it's been divided. Sadly, Germanists, there is nothing for German just yet, but we've got phonics examples, we've got numbers examples, we've got things about family and friends. And if I click on that, we can see here that there's loads and loads of different activities already that the children can, that you can just take and use within your classroom that have all got audio files attached. So if you have created your own scheme of work, and you want to make sure that that scheme of work has got some really authentic listening materials in it, then that might be the place to go. So I realise that we are now 5 minutes from the end of our allocated slot. So I think it would be a good time for us to have a think about any questions that we might have, or any ideas that you want to share that I've not mentioned here. My list is not exhaustive. So let's see if you want to pop anything into the question and answer. Any questions that you have about anything that we've heard, and we'll have a quick chat now. Yes, you can get the PowerPoint. Yes, the slides will be available. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to access all of that. If you do want any other resources, Khalida, then just drop me an email and I can send you anything that you want that you've seen in here and you want to reuse. Super. Oh, thank you, Julie. Thank you. Brilliant. Any questions at all before we finish? Oh, how would you differentiate for lower ability? Yes, great question. So if I'm creating an activity like the one that I just showed you just here, I might, for example, have a word bank that the children can access, or I might ask them just to listen out for particular information rather than listening to the whole thing. Lots of times with these kinds of activities, like for example here, the battleship one, again, for some children, I might reduce the number of things that they've got to do to reduce the cognitive load, or again, ask them to have their knowledge organizer in front of them so that they can access the words and the phrases that they're going to need. I try to use lots and lots of visuals where I can. So j'aime and je n'aime pas, very clear to the children what those both mean. In this one, for example, I might again provide the children with less boxes to have to do, although I do try to make sure that the children are all accessing the same task. And sometimes with lower ability children as well, a little bit of pre-teaching time and a little bit more thinking time, so an opportunity to embed that language before the lesson can be really helpful, although I realise that is difficult with the time constraints. With something like this, the Lotto en ligne, I might very well put the written version of the fruit underneath as well to remind them, so they're not just having to look at the picture and remember, they've actually got the word there and they're matching it to what I'm saying. Montrez-moi, again, I might reduce the number of cards for some of the lower ability, or I might have writing on them to help them, again, pre-teaching or thinking time to help them to access that vocabulary. So a lot of the time it is about providing them with scaffold and support that's going to help them to access the activities that everybody else is doing in the class. I hope that answers the question. Lovely. Right. I don't know if we have any more questions particularly. Oh, you're welcome, Sam. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Well, in that case, if we have no more questions, I think that we can. Oh, merci, Nadine. Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. I think it would be a good time to come to a close now, but if you want to stay in the chat and put any questions in there for me, then please feel free, or into the Q&A as well before you leave. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Oh, yes, Sam, are you okay? Oh, thanks, Kate. Merci, Nadine. Any more questions, just pop them into the chat. Oh, thank you, Anushree. I'll just leave the chat open for another couple of minutes, and then if we have any further questions, please feel free to pop them in before we need to finish at 2. Thank you, everybody. Oh, let's see what else we've got. Merci, Naïma. Okay, thank you, everybody. I think we'll bring the meeting to a close if there's no more questions. Merci. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.